And another point that I was thinking is what we talked about in the beginning, where we said different cultures have different meanings to different words, right? And so when you reflect back to them, especially if you work in an environment where it's multiple cultures, like Canada is bigger than the US, UK, we have many, many people from different areas. And as Georgie said in the beginning, different words mean different things to those people. So when you reflect that back to them in the work environment or social environment, they can then correct you and say, no, I actually meant this. You may heard one thing, but when you reflect back to them, they say, no, I actually meant that. And then they explain to you that what they meant. And instead of leaving the conversation in the place of, in your head, you assumed one thing and they meant another thing, you actually clarifying things and you getting on the same page, should you say. Anything to add on that, Georgie?
I think I'll just agree that I think that the beauty of mirroring is that you will start to understand how people see the world through their own language. I think in conversations, people often go to questions and narrowing down too fast, such that they then miss out. For me, some of the most important parts of conversations is trying to understand how people see the world. And that requires sometimes a little bit more language, because the problem with questions is we make the assumption of what certain terms mean. And we start to go down one route, which we are interested in potentially. Whilst with mirroring, you'll go down a route which other people are interested in. So even by their selection of what they choose to include, you're learning about them.
Yeah, without judgment, because you can also judge them about what they say and their intonation. But the whole thing is to repeat it and listen and hear. And then in your TED Talk, you talk about holding space. And I think that's the next nugget, should you say, or the next phase to it, right? So can you share with our audience and with me, what does that mean for you, holding space?
Holding space is creating a container in which you and I can have a dialogue where someone knows that they're going to be listened to and not interrupted. And I think that container can be such a beautiful and valuable thing, because there's something about being listened to which allows us to actually dig deeper into ourselves, into our thoughts, and come up with novel thoughts, solutions, ideas, etc. We can't do it alone. Actually, being with somebody else has an incredible effect in doing that. Now, you probably think, oh, I'm doing this already, I'm with someone. But when we don't bring our full presence, also our lack of interruption, we're not providing other people with the space for clean and clearer thinking that we could do. Often in dialogue, people are waiting for the person to finish speaking such that they can say what they want to say, rather than actually just holding the space in silence and allowing people to say what they want to say at the pace that they want to say it. I often find that the most deep and real contributions made in conversation are after someone has initially shared something, in that space when you would expect the other partner to start speaking again. What often happens is in a dialogue, you have maybe somebody asking questions or making a statement. The other person responds in a way that is related to what's being shared. But if you give a few seconds extra of space, they will usually share something else that's meaningful to them. Maybe something you haven't even asked them about. Now that can be incredible. That can actually take the conversation in a completely different direction. And the reason that people do that is they feel comfortable. They feel comfortable to go inside themselves, to think, to feel, and see what emerges. And they'll share that if there is a space for it.
Is there a certain amount of time that somebody will hold space after the last word have been spoken?
It's hard to give exact number of seconds, because I think everything is very contextual. And I often say as well that the beginning of conversations, especially with new people, you may want to give less time because you're trying to build momentum. But I think actually later in the conversation, when you feel at ease yourself, by the way, that's really important, because otherwise people pick up on your anxiety and then they think they've got to respond quickly. But if you can be okay in silence, that's great. And also, it's also about reading signals. But you can look at someone's facial expressions and see where they are with their thinking. If their eyes are still looking to the side and they look in a pensive mood, maybe they're not done. Wait it out. Wait for their eyes to come back. Wait to hear the intonation to suggest they've completed the sentence. If you're not sure, okay, give it an extra 2 seconds. Really wait. And I always say to my clients to experiment. Sometimes I say, like, wait 5 seconds. And they're like, what? 5 seconds? Sounds like forever. I'm like, it's really not forever. If you can be at ease and last another 5 seconds, you're also showing other people, again, that spaciousness is okay. It's okay not to fill every moment. And actually, it creates more energizing conversations because you have spaciousness, and it's a really important quality in great conversation.
Yeah. And I think it creates also presence for the person that holds the silent. We all have examples of people we know that they walk in the room and they don't say anything, but they just look at us in the silence, and they have so much presence and they're so impressive, but they didn't say anything. They're just there. And I think silence, and like you said, the key is you being comfortable with silence, make you also hone in that presence. So even practices like, I'm sure you have other tips, but I'm thinking practices like going for dinner with yourself, with no phone, with nothing, sitting somewhere with yourself in silence without thinking. And it's so hard today because we are bombarded with stimulation 24/7, right? And then we got addicted to stimulation. So now we need to get disconnected to be okay with being silent and just being present. I used to go for dinner with myself, just me and the food, and I'll just be there. And I find it helped so much. And sometimes even sitting next to your partner or next to your friend and being silent and getting yourself comfortable with that silent, that you don't have anxiety to like, oh my God, I have to fill up the space, makes a huge difference. Do you have tips for how people can get comfortable with being silent?
Yeah, you're right. These days, we don't do it that much. I often get clients to practice doing some eye contact exercises with each other in silence. Of course, this requires a partner, but I'm sure everyone could find somebody who's willing to sit with them for 30 seconds to start with in silence, just trying to stay in eye contact. And we increase this to a minute and then 3 minutes. And the key here is to notice where your attention goes. Notice the sensations that are happening in your body, the thoughts that are happening and arising, the stories being created, where you're focusing on. Is it internal? Is it external, looking at the person? And then not to judge that, but just to simply notice the experience as it emerges. And one of the most powerful things about these exercises is that people realize that often the anxiety peaks and then it comes down. And it might come up again, but actually people start to get used to the feelings and they drop into a sense of calmness, of softness, intimacy with themselves and with other people. A lot of the time, I think that we get lost in the way up to the peak and we get overwhelmed and we just switch off, we look away. We can't deal with it, we say something. The practice here is to be with the anxiety as it is emerging. This is very similar to meditation in that sense. We're not being reactive. We're exploring what it's like to have these experiences and realizing that everything will eventually change.